Um, so, more about your career, because I feel like you have a really impressive catalogue. So I know you've traveled to America and you have worked with men who were on like death row.
Hmm.
So tell me about that experience, because
Hmm.
speaking to you, it seems like it was life changing. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was life changing. Um, so if I just tell you a little bit very briefly
Yeah,
about how it all happened, because I think it's
yeah,
important that people know how accessible it
mm-hmm.
is,
Yeah,
and also why I decided to go.
yeah,
So I always wanted to have some kind of work experience in the human rights field.
mm-hmm.
Tried to get applications in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
applied. Ironically, when I came back from the US, that's when I got my responses, which tells you a lot about access in the UK when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
things like this. But yeah, I was 30 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at a point in my life where you make decisions about what's happening next. People
Mm-hmm.
making decisions about who they're going to spend the rest of their life with,
Mm-hmm.
where they're going to live, careers,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And I was literally watching a TED talk by the guy who I then went on to work with, Brian Stevenson,
Mm-hmm.
talking about death penalty work, talking about the beauty of being in proximity with people and
Mm-hmm.
how you make a difference to people's lives, and how he was personally making a difference to people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another Black lawyer
Mm-hmm.
who was articulate, who was persuasive, who was
Mm-hmm.
also compassionate,
Yeah.
but very smart. And I was thinking, all I said to myself was, I was at a train station and I said,
Mm.
I want to work for you. That's all I said. I watched it. I was waiting for my friend to pick me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the law firm there and then,
Mm.
spoke to them on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and spoke to them again a week later.
Yeah.
And they were like, "What's this girl from the UK interested in death penalty work? Why you want to work here for? Or what's going on?" They had no
Yeah.
idea about what the UK was doing. What's the
Mm.
criminal justice system like?
Mm.
They were oblivious to that. Like, why us? I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I just feel like I need to be there. I just need to experience it. What I
Mm-hmm.
loved about Equal Justice Initiative, which is the name of the law firm or
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, is when I looked at the website to see the application,
Mm.
they said, we will give preference to people of color.
Mm.
And I'd never seen that before. And
Mm.
again, it's for me, it was about being seen,
Mm.
because for so long I'd felt like I hadn't been seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, this is it. This is
Yeah.
them saying we're here to reach out because we know how hard it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
So finally getting the opportunity to work for them was incredible.
Yeah.
Um, all by itself, just getting there was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely a massive culture shock because one, it was Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So Alabama already Southern state, Confederate, birthplace of the Confederacy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Reaching there, you have to understand the historical and political backdrop, which still exists to this
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say honestly that having traveled to California, New York, and other places on holidays,
Mm-hmm.
when you go to this part of America,
Mm-hmm.
this is America for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I see Alabama, I think this is actually the true America, not the
Mm.
touristy side that I see.
Yeah.
Um, what I mean by Confederacy is the whole town of Montgomery, which is the capital of Alabama,
Mm.
had these statues of Robert E. Lee, who is like the father of the Confederacy, which was the southern states who were trying to get together and form their own state
Mm-hmm.
away from the rest of the US because they wanted to preserve slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like their big hero in that
Mm-hmm.
town, in that
Mm-hmm.
city.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also the birthplace of Martin Luther King
Mm-hmm.
and his church. So
Mm-hmm.
you can already see the tension, right? There's a
Yeah.
tension. You've got people who are
Yeah.
waving their US flags,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got black people who are there. That's also where the Montgomery bus protests were happening, boycotts were happening.
Mm-hmm.
So much tension in this community,
Mm-hmm.
so much civil rights activism was happening in this community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still, when I was there, it still hadn't died. So even though, and this is something that I learned from working with Brian Stevenson,
Mm-hmm.
is as much as enforced servitude, slavery had ended
Mm-hmm.
in the 19th century, had ended around that time,
Mm-hmm.
the narrative of racial injustice continued.
Mm.
So the ideology that you're not fully human,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not as smart as us, you've got to work harder, you're below us, you're morally base, still existed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was bleeding into the criminal justice system, that was bleeding into the education, how they
Mm.
viewed us. I remember when I was there, um, one of the main objectives of EGI was not only to help people who were on death row,
Mm.
but also to bring healing to the community.
Mm.
Which is what I loved about their work, because as much as they were lawyers who were all about criminal justice,
Mhm.
they worked in a very holistic way.
Yeah.
So they work with communities to educate them.
Mhm.
Because if you think about, if you live in a country where, like I said, people see you as less than human,
Mm.
and that's also being fed through your education,
Mm.
are you going to really see a life where you could see yourself being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever one day?
Mm.
You're going to think, this is my existence. Why
Yeah.
should I even bother try? And then you end up in a situation where you think, well, life of crime, life of poverty,
Mm.
opportunities for me don't exist, so let me choose this path, because the path it's already been mapped out for me. The system
Mhm.
isn't working in my favor.
Yeah.
And so you saw a lot of people falling into that,
Mm.
and living in that,
Mhm.
fathers and sons in prison, whole generations. Imagine whole
Wow.
generations are
Yeah.
out, which means who's left to father these children? Who's left to even have children?
Mm.
If you're taking whole generations out and putting them into prison. One of the main things, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but one of
Mm.
the two main things that I was personally involved in
Mhm.
was the working with juvenile life without parole prisoners, and then also being involved in the community restoration project.
Mhm.
So with the juveniles without parole project or casework that I was doing,
Mm.
I was working with, so before 2012 or
Mhm.
up to 2005, I
Mhm.
would say, they were still executing young people. So when I say young people, so from as even as young as 13, they were still executing young people
Whoa.
for, it didn't even have to be a violent crime. Because you have what they have this rule in this part of the US, which is called more or less a principle of 3 strikes and you're out. If you
Mm.
commit 2 non-violent crimes and then you do another crime, you get a automatic life sentence. So basically, if I go and rob somebody, or not rob somebody, I go and steal something from someone,
Mm.
and I steal something from someone again, and I get caught, I'm like, look, if I do this again, I'm going to jail. So I might as well just do something violent in it. You just kind of just give up on any prospect of thinking,
Mm.
because you've got another choice in your world of what
Yeah.
else can be out there in terms of opportunities for you.
Mm.
You think this is the only life for me. If my third offense is going to take me in for life, I might as well go in hard and go in with something. So you throw yourself into this system, which
Mm.
is already there to kind of catch you out.
Mhm.
So you end up with a lot of young people who end up doing crimes,
Mhm.
who either before 2005, like I said, would end up getting executed. I think up to that stage, they'd already executed about 400,
Oh, that's
right? In
disgusting.
the southern states, not just Alabama. And then from 2005 to 2012, we had a ruling in 2012 called Miller and Alabama, if you really want to know, Miller and Alabama, where the Supreme Court said, okay, it is unconstitutional
Mhm.
to have executions, mandatory life sentences.
Go figure.
It won't be mandatory,
Yeah.
but you can still consider it, um, as long as you also consider their age and their capacity to change. So remember, young people were being, well, not remember, I'm telling you now, young people were being tried as adults.
Mm.
So they commit a crime and were putting straight into an adult system and given adult sentences. No regard was given for age. And no regard was given for the fact that, look, you're young, you could change, you didn't know what you're doing, you're acting on impulse. None of that was considered.
Mm.
But now you can consider that.
Mhm.
You can consider it. It's not even saying you
Yeah.
rule it out.
Yeah.
So I was working on that kind of, I was gathering a lot of the data for that, but also working with the lawyers to kind of work through some of the cases, because there were loads of cases, thousands of children and young people who were still, I mean, I met a couple of them who were basically on death sentences because they were given life without parole.
Mhm.
No parole means there's no opportunity for
Yeah.
anybody to consider whether you should be let out, whether you've changed and developed and learned and had any insight into your crimes. It's
Mhm.
effectively a life, it's a death sentence.
Mhm.
Um, 9-year-olds were getting sentenced for 40 years in prison.
What?
40 to 50. It's no joke.
That is insane.
America, or I'll say Alabama, is just all by itself. And I can't say that, I can only speak for there. I can't speak for
Mm,
anywhere else. It was just another world where you just think, how is
literally.
this really existing?
Mm.